the Bennington School District Incorporated. And we're here tonight to obviously warn the meeting for tomorrow, the vote for tomorrow. Let me just read the warning if I might. The legal voters of Bennington School District Incorporated are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Firehouse, River Street, Bennington, Vermont, on Monday the 20th, which we are doing this evening at 6:30 o'clock in the evening, to transact the following business from the floor. To conduct an informal hearing on the proposed Bennington School District budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2013. At this time, I'd like to introduce Vice Chair BSD, Board Member George Sleeman, to introduce the table here, please.
Thank you. My name is George Sleeman, Vice Chair of the Bennington School District, and I would let each of my other fellow board members introduce themselves, but before I do, I'd like to say that Mr. Swihard is absent tonight due to a rather serious accident that his wife has had. However, she's coming along fine, has returned home, but he is there with her this evening. And Marie DeKoff, who has a death in the family as of yesterday, is unable to also be here. And with that, I'd like to move over. You make your introductions. Fellow board members?
Start with Paul.
Paul Becker.
Kelly Kennedy.
Jackie Prue.
Claude DeLucia.
I would now also like to introduce Catherine McClure, Superintendent of Schools, and Richard Pembroke, who is our Chief Financial Officer. And Donna Leap is sitting in the audience, Assistant Superintendent of Schools. I would like to move to the other end of the table and ask the following people to be acknowledged. We've got Donna. Is Donna here?
Yeah.
It's Donna McKenzie, Molly Stark School. Jim Law, Bennington Elementary School. Don't have the other one.
We're expecting her.
Where are we missing one?
Yes.
Donna Cawley, who has not arrived yet. Also, I would like to introduce Danielle DeBeau. Have I introduced all of them? Have I missed someone? Okay, so Catherine,
All right, thank
I'll
you.
turn it over to you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming and compliment the board and administrators, both at the schools, the school principals, and the SU administrators for working very hard on this budget. The important thing about this budget proposal is that it maintains regular education programming for all of our students. It includes some additional supports for increasing student populations with complex special needs. And we have had the reduction of federal funding anticipated, which has caused us to move some costs into the local district that were borne by the federal grants. And we will cover all three of those aspects of this budget. Instructionally, it's very important to know that this is a critical time of the year. We must have a budget in order to proceed with transition of our students for the next academic year, as well as our summer programming. I'd like to call on Jim Law, if you would, to talk about our maintenance, our maintaining class size and classroom teacher numbers. Thank you, Jim.
Do I have permission to speak?
Yes.
Okay. I am not a resident of town, so typical protocol would require that I do have your permission, so I appreciate that. By passing this budget, we will be able to maintain class sizes in the district at a reasonable level of teacher-to-student ratios. If the budget were not passed, we would be extremely concerned about what those ratios would be, what class sizes would wind up being. It would create significant difficulty in trying to serve those students within a classroom. This budget, with the approval and support of the board, has been able to provide a situation in which those numbers are within what used to be known as school quality standards and what have been recognized as good practicing principles. So we really would appreciate support from the town so that we can continue with a program in all 3 Bennington elementary schools that would be supportive of students to be able to meet their needs and teachers be able to make contact with students on a regular basis throughout an instructional lesson. It's often difficult for teachers to make contacts, and we know that when teachers and students build relationships and make contacts where kind of specific skills can be targeted, that students can be more successful, and that's what we all want in our educational program. So this budget does help support that.
Thank you. And with permission to speak, well, actually Donna lives in town, so.
Yes.
Donna Mackenzie King, if you would just discuss our maintaining the arts and physical education library. The board worked very, very hard to maintain these positions in this budget. Donna?
So the current budget that is put before you does allow us to maintain all of our arts and our PE in our library. That would be instrumental music, chorus, regular instructional music, art, physical education, and library. What we find at the elementary level is that the more children are exposed to a variety of different genres, the more that a child might find their island of competency. They get into middle school or high school, join the drama club, be part of the chorus festival there, and even on through college. It's really important, administration believes it's absolutely important that children have the opportunity to experience these things. Many of our children would not be able to take a band lesson outside of school. It would be a financial burden on the family. They wouldn't be able to join a private chorus group or take dance lessons. So we feel strongly that we want to support the arts. Bennington School Board has done a wonderful job supporting this in very tight budgets over the last few years, and we ask for your support to continue that for our children in Bennington.
I'd like to speak to our increasing population of students with complex special needs. It's really important that we understand that the funds used for special education are to allow students to access their regular education and build their skills. These are not funds that are beyond what regular education would provide all students, but to help these students access regular education. We have seen and continue to see, and will continue to see over the next couple of years, an increasing number of students on the spectrum of autism. And this has been a trend throughout the country. It is not unique to Bennington itself. We are including in this budget additional funds for a team of professionals to work with these students and to help provide professional development to their classroom teachers. That would be a special education teacher that has had significant experience with students with autism, an OT, occupational therapist, and a speech and language therapist. And I think she will be able to make this transition, but Donna Colley, our principal of Monument School, can add some information about our students with special needs in that population. This is a federal government mandate that we provide free and appropriate education for all of our students, and these accommodations are important for students with complex special needs, as well as more of the traditional special needs that we see to access their education. Donna, do you want to add comments?
Great timing, thank you. I am Donna Colley, and I am the principal at Monument Elementary School, and I have had the opportunity to speak to this area of the budget. And again, I think what's most important for voters to understand, community members and parents is that the programming that within the budget in regards to special education is for those students who are identified to access the same education as all children. It's not anything additional, it's not anything above what all of our students get. It just allows them, excuse me, the opportunity to get the same access as all children.
One of the areas that we are including in the budget for next year are areas that used to be provided by federal grants. And one of the most important here in Bennington is our home liaisons. Donna McKenzie, would you like to speak to that?
Absolutely. Bennington Elementary and Molly Stark have, in particular, had a problem with absenteeism, children coming in late. Sometimes that means that they may not get breakfast depending on what time they came in. And we have hired our homeschool liaisons through title funding grant money, and that has now shifted over into the local budget. We've also reduced that time for the person. So we're really only looking at a 2.5 days a week, not even quite half time. We have seen at Molly Stark a tremendous increase in the amount of students that are getting to school on time. They're coming in with their siblings on time, parents are bringing them in, they're able to get breakfast before instruction starts at 8:25, they're able to be in the classroom ready to learn. So this has been huge. The other piece that our homeschool liaison does, although we both have guidance counselors or social workers who do access families and make wonderful connections with them, it's a cumbersome job with 400 students and almost 300 at Bennington. So that additional person is able to go over to the family's home, meet with the mom or the dad, try to help them figure out what's blocking, what's hard for you to get your child here on time. And sometimes it's just helping with a different routine in the morning, allowing the parent to know the child can come and have breakfast. We don't have to have everything done before they come over to school. Sometimes it's an organizational piece for a parent who might have several children, have the backpacks ready the night before, have them packed, have the child be responsible to get their snack, their juice. So it's a transfer of responsibility to the child, but it's really helping that parent understand the importance of it. And research certainly shows that poor habits at the elementary school result in poor habits at the high school, which result in an early dropout rate. So we absolutely feel certain that the dropout rate at the high school is tied into what we do at the elementary level. And that's part of the reason we're asking you to support those positions.
Thank you. Also, it's important to remember that this education is an investment. It's an investment in our future, not only our children's, but our own. Right now, the town of Bennington is considering a strategic plan in which the schools play a very important part, a very important role. We actually are working with town economic task force to include goals that strengthen the educational system. This is good for our economy, and we are working very closely with area businesses as well as the economic task force to involve students at the elementary level, not only at the middle school and the high school. We're on a number of, the administrators in the SVSU are on a number of these committees in town, and we're really striving to strengthen the entire focus of the community. So this is an important aspect of supporting the budget as we move into the next fiscal year. Jim Law, I wondered if you would speak about the after-school and summer programming, another area where research has shown that students are more engaged in the regular schooling if they're involved in after-school and summer programming.
The board in the past and within this budget has been very supportive of after-school programming and extended year programming, which are summer services for students. Most of that is through a program called the Mosaic program, which is a 21st century grant. But there are also programs like Girls on the Run and Four Winds that are incorporated either into school or as an after-school program, Girls on the Run being specifically for girls. Those opportunities create situations in which the Girls on the Run practice leadership. They do get physical exercise too. It helps develop teamwork for the girls, and it's just a wonderful opportunity for them in many ways. The Mosaic program has a variety of programs. Some of those are physical education type programs, but some of them are also an opportunity for creative arts and looking at opportunities with a different perspective than a typical classroom may. Again, as in the music program or the arts program, it gets students an opportunity to express themselves in a different way, which may be the way they learn best. And we do need to reach all students in our programming. Those programs are, very supportive of academics, so it's not that we're going in a different direction, because all things that we do need to be supportive of academic progress for students. But it is another way of us meeting students' needs that is a little bit less traditional, where a teacher may be providing information and students kind of processing that, but with a twist so that we can meet the individual needs of a student.
And Donna, probably a last comment before we move to board comments and the fiscal presentation.
I think it's also important to recognize that the board supported our recommendation to keep the third-party contracted service in our budget. That contracted service is important for us as an SVSU and a BSD to build infrastructure in regards to servicing our students who are identified. I think Catherine spoke to the large amount of students that are in our district and are identified and on the autism spectrum. This allows us to have a third-party contract come in, support our students, train our professionals, train our paraprofessionals. So indeed, what can happen is as we move forward, we're not in need of that third-party contract always. It allows us to have our infrastructure here in our school district and then move forward and continue with that programming as we also learn. You're welcome.
We're going to move to the financial and then come back to the board and open it to questions.
Hopefully, most of you have been following this process. It's been pretty well documented on CAT TV and in the papers over the last few weeks. So a lot of this probably is going to be a surprise to you, but I'll go through it fairly quickly and be able to answer questions as we move forward. This is a snapshot of the BSD budget. 5% is for SVSU administration, 15% is for building administration and building operations. What we mean by that is really the principal's office, running the physical plants, the heats, the lights, what it takes to keep the buildings operating. 30.4% is for special programming, and just under 50% is for regular programming. So the key thing that hopefully you'll take away from this is 80 cents on every dollar is going to direct instruction to kids to support the students. And that's where the administration believes we should be spending our money, and I think it's pretty obvious that that's where it's going. Part of the reason for the increase, this is a complicated slide, and some people liked it, some didn't, but it does tell a good story. These are the various grants we receive. I do apologize, we got two colors that are close here. But you can see over time, FY11 was our ERA money, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act that took place. That money was in 11 and 12. A big portion of what's taken place in 13 is a lot of Medicaid money that we were using for a bunch of various programs in the district. And you can see that money is significantly dropping off as we move into FY14. There's a couple of different reasons for that. Sequestration, you've heard that name a lot in national news. That is trickling down through the state of Vermont to the local districts to take money away. We're just starting to get our anticipated grants for next year, and preliminarily it looks like we were unfortunately pretty close to being correct in our anticipation of grants. Of the roughly $3 million, it looks like we're going to receive about 300,000 more than we anticipated. We were anticipating a deeper cut, but that money looks like we're going to be able to recoup a little bit of it, but that's still a small portion of the money that we're losing for next year. The humidity hasn't helped these out here today. So total budget increase, we have increased quite a bit the last 2 years. We're not denying that. We're being fairly upfront with it, but we're just asking the public to look at it over time, because if you look at it from 2009, where we actually kept it flat, we reduced it in 2011, and now we had a modest increase in 12, a good increase this year, and then we're asking for an increase next year. Over the 5 years, that's a 4.37% increase if you average it over those 5 years. The board took a very conscious effort, 2011 through 12, try to keep that budget as low as possible, try to keep the impact off the taxpayers as much as they could. And unfortunately now, we have the downside of having to pay for those reductions that we've taken over the years. This seems to be the slide that everybody likes the most. It's the education spending per equalized pupil. That's my terminology through Act 68, the state funding formula. It's actually not my terminology, it's the state's terminology. It's the one I live by. Most people call it cost per pupil. What's it cost us to educate a pupil? Claude reminded me of something earlier before the meeting that I want to clarify. This is net of local revenue, and local revenue is a long, complicated thing that I'm not going to get into, but I term it as other than property tax revenue. So there's a lot of other, we earned interest income, we get some other local grants, a SPED reimbursement. Those are all considered local income in the formula. So that gets netted out, and then they're saying, okay, after you net all that stuff out, what's your cost per pupil? BSD is going to be, based on this budget, $12,119. That is below the SVSU average of $12,685, and that's below the state anticipated number of $13,560. So even though we're seeing a large increase, we're still not yet at the SU's average nor the state average. And another big reason for that is a large portion of that increase is in the special needs area, where we're getting 50% reimbursement back. So even though you're seeing a large increase, as I talked about that local revenue, we're getting a reimbursement back for that increased expenses. So the net number is what hidden here, and this is the key driver in the tax rate. And we can talk about that if anybody has any questions in a minute. I'm afraid I'm going to pull off one of these at one point. So since that's a key driver in the tax rate, again, we wanted to show you, and again, the board, there's an increase from 9 to 10, and they kept it fairly level. They worked hard to keep that tax rate. They understood the needs of the community. And in the last couple of years, it's gone up. One factor you have to realize, a big portion of these increases, and it's a complicated process, but through passing of budgets around the state had to raise the baseline tax rate. And this year alone, we're seeing BSD's tax rate go up about 7 cents. The state has raised the baseline tax rate 5 cents. So that's been a big contributor to that increase. And this is a new nice slide that everybody seems to like, and I'll turn it up so you can see it. The question is, well, how much is it going to cost me at my house? This is just a simple graphic. $100,000 house is $70, just under $70. And it's just a simple multiplier depending on your house. Now that's, for lack of a better term, the sticker price of the tax increase. We're in a community, as everybody knows, that is not the wealthiest in the state. And in fact, I don't remember exactly what this year's number was, but the taxpayers, I can comfortably say, more than 60% of the taxpayers in this community receive some sort of income sensitivity payment and/or rebate. So most people aren't going to pay those numbers. And what I have here, which was a handout over on the table, this is generated by the state of Vermont, the Agency of Education. This is just a grid, and it's a complicated formula, and there's tiered at 47,000, 89,000, and then it caps off at roughly about 97,000, I think. But just as an example, if you have a $100,000 home, the full tax rate is going to be $1,421 for your education tax. You don't pay that until you hit roughly a $60,000 of household income. So for the seniors in the community, if they're on a fixed income, they can look at this. They're likely going to pay something less than this. And it's tiered based on the value of the house and the household income that's associated with it. It's a very good document. This gets a little complicated up here. If you want to try to read it, you can. But the key is you can look on the grid to roughly what your taxes would be, and you can compare that to this year. So not everyone's going to pay that full sticker price of $69 for a $100,000 house. We know for a fact roughly 60% of them will not pay that amount. So that was my quick go through, and I don't know, I'll be happy to answer questions. I don't know what's up next.
Any questions from anyone, please feel free to ask them, and let's see what we can do to help answer them. Yes, sir.
If you wouldn't mind, sir, would you mind stepping up to the mic, because we are recording this, please?
Well, I think you're going to be able to hear me without the mic.
Okay.
Hear most of you, and I really think that's something you folks need to address at these meetings, especially if there were more people who retired or people who
Larry,
here. I think what's going on here. My wife is the worst one.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'm Steve McClure. I'm from Bennington. Rick, if you go back 2 slides, what does the red line represent? Where did that come from? Is the constant?
This red line?
Yes.
I'm sorry, thanks for explaining. That's just a trend line, and the average increase in the tax rate over that period of time is 4.3%. That just represents the trend of those plots.
One other question that I have that isn't clear to me. What happens if you spend less than the budget? I mean, it could happen. Where does the money go?
So if this budget passes,
Yeah, this budget passes, and then it turns out you didn't need as much.
Carries over.
if whatever we don't spend by law, in Act 68, we are required to give back to the voters the following year in the form of fund balance, which is in that local revenue I talked about before, and that brings the tax rate down.
And how about the reverse? What happens if you go over budget?
If I go over budget, we have to deficit spend, obviously, and we have to make that up in the next year, which would be a big spike into the budget. Okay.
That's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
First of all, would you mind explaining in the graph for the Bennington School District total budget, there's both the red line and the blue line, and I'm afraid I'm not clear as to what each of those represent. I see there's a trend line, but
Same thing, I apologize, the blue
well,
line.
actually, I'm not. I know the trend line, but there's a red line in our handouts, as well as the blue line.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't have that slide. I'm sorry. So, I don't know what page this is, 1, 2, on page 3.
Yes.
Just so everybody's looking at the same thing, because I don't have that big board up here. That red line represents both the budget, which is the blue, and then when you add the incoming grants, the total expenditures, or the total dollars being spent, is truly not total expenditures, because some of those expenditures or SU expenditures for the benefit of BSD. But you see what the amount of money that's being spent in the Bennington School District, and it's hard to tell because this slide was mimeographed down for this thing, but you can tell ever so slightly that these red and the blue line are coming together. It doesn't look that way here, but they are, and that just reflecting the loss of the grant money.
I see. Thank you. The other two questions, I wondered if somebody could explain what's included in special programming, and also for students with special needs, what's meant by equal access. I guess I realize that those students are definitely entitled to an education according to their abilities, but my understanding is some of them may not be able to master some of the things that regular students do. So I'm wondering about the term access.
It really addresses that they have the same opportunities as their peers, as their unidentified peers. So when you talk about access, if you have a typical third grader that is involved in everything throughout the day, those students that are identified still have that right to have equal access in everything that happens throughout that day, regardless of their disability. So the special programmings and support services those children as identified need allow them to do that. So they're not getting any services above and beyond what all of our children are getting. It's just services to support them in regards to their disability so that they can access the same as their counterparts. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so special services then, or special programming, that's for children who with disabilities, is it?
We have children that are identified in our VSU.
Yes.
Some are in regular classrooms,
Yeah.
just as their counterparts are, and some are in special programmings. We do have special programming such as Acorns, which is for our students who are on the spectrum. And that's a self-contained program, and then they access their regular education environment as they're able to. Another program is the Ideals program in the middle school. There's the Ideals program in Molly Stark, so depending upon their age level, but we do have them throughout the supervisory union.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Charlie.
Please identify yourself.
Charlie Jingo. I had a couple questions. If you could just explain for us, what are the grants that have been lost? And so kind of part A of that question, and then the second part of the question is, and of those that have been lost, what grants are included in the budget, then got moved into the budget?
All right.
We haven't, well, for this year, we haven't totally lost any grant. It's largely a reduction in a number of different grants. Title IV went away 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, Title IV was a federal grant for technology, and that has disappeared completely.
Actually, that probably disappeared right after ERA monies. That
It
probably
did,
disappeared
just about
this
that
year
time.
in 13. But, you know, we're seeing reductions everywhere else. I mean, title money, we're seeing a reduction of about $300,000.
Can you tell us what title money means?
I can do
I'll
that.
I'll give you the grant.
You give the details.
Well, and then I'll move back to Rick. But Title I actually dates back to the Johnson years in the war on poverty. And so it's generating funds to supplement the educational programming in the school districts based on the percentage of poverty. And so schools with higher poverty, supervisory unions with higher poverty levels get more money. We actually have the highest this year in the state of Vermont for our Title I allocation and funding. We jockey back and forth with Burlington and some other larger towns, but Burlington and Bennington tend to be those that receive the largest allocation. We must spend that money on supplementary programming. You're not allowed to use federal funds to supplant, to replace your local funding. And so it's meant to give an extra boost or additional resources and personnel. We use ours for small group instruction in literacy and mathematics at all of our elementary schools, as well as the middle school, at the Bennington elementary schools, and some of our supervisory union schools, and the middle school and high school. So we have programs specifically to give additional instruction to those students who are not making the proficiency that we would like to see them make in literacy and numeracy and mathematics.
IDAB.
Sure.
Donna, do you want to
IDAB is special education grant. The federal government, you can help. The federal government in the early 70s, when they passed the federal law for free and appropriate education for all students, promised that they would fund this at higher levels than they actually ever have. So we get, it's called a flow-through fund, which also Title I is, they come from the federal government and then flow through the state. The state allocates to us based on our child count. Donna, do you want to add anything?
And I was just gonna add that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but what we have been promised by the state has never really been what we have been reimbursed. Correct? Federally, then state, and then to us, it seems to be a smaller percentage each year.
Right. The state uses, the feds say that we're supposed to get 60% reimbursement for our special ed costs. We've never achieved that. They claim when you put this into the formula, we're supposed to be there, but I haven't figured out how they add that up because I've never been able to get there. But I think that's what you're talking about, is we never get. And we get, our reimbursement from the state is typically, and it flows through from the feds, but it's typically between 51 and 56%. And this is supposed to supplement that. 21st century, we're not losing, that's a grant, we're not losing any money. I'm not going to spend time talking about that if that's okay.
What is
That's
that?
the after-school program,
Okay.
basically.
Thank you.
Now, there is a risk that this is our last year.
Yeah, I was going to say this is our last year that
FY14 will be our last year, so we don't know what 15 is going to look like.
Right, but we'll apply for another 5-year grant. Next year is the last year of our 5-year grant.
Medicaid.
Act 23 best done. I mean, we get very little money, very little was cut. What is exactly, that's for professional development of some degree. What's that best for?
Best funds actually goes to support and train. It's better research it's based on research and better teaching, and it supports our professionals to go to conferencing and come back with more knowledge in regards to addressing children with special needs, who may be highly intensive, and it also has provided some money for us in regards to some materials at some time, but it's really diminished greatly. The Medicaid, if I also could reflect upon our Medicaid funds.
That's next,
Yeah, that actually has reduced over each year. We've had support programs, especially for those children at risk. We have summer programs for them based on Medicaid funds, and that's been greatly reduced to the point of we do not have a summer program this summer. Coming FY14 in July for our students at risk. So that's a difficult task to not be able to provide those services for some children, which we hope to.
I just invited Danielle up here to help me. Preschool is the next one, and you see that grant coming in very small in FY12. Help me, Danielle, that was a planning grant that we got from DCPC, and help me, what's that acronym stand for?
The Vermont Preschool Collaborative.
And so that was a very small grant, which we were then awarded a large, $135,000.
$35,000.
This year, coupled with $30,000 from the state, and we got a small grant from the state, so that's what makes up that preschool portion. And right now, although we have an application in to VCPC for a continuation grant for this year, the only thing that we are aware of, we're anticipating, I guess, and I think we got notification from the state under $30,000 for next year, so that actually may be premature on my part to even have that on here. But that was for what? Explain to them what the preschool grants were for.
The preschool grant helps financially support our public pre-K program, in which we provide public pre-K in a variety of community settings for 104 Bennington children. We see this as a very important program because it helps smooth the transition into kindergarten and essentially helps narrow the achievement gap as they grow and move on into the elementary grades.
In a way, I just want to explain a little bit how that works and why these funders are willing to fund this, because the education funding formula in the state of Vermont is based on what's called equalized pupil, and I'm not going to go into the long formula that generates an equalized pupil, but just picture it as a student sitting at a desk. A little more complicated than that, but that's the easiest way to start. And they divide that number into your education spending to come up with the cost per pupil slide I showed you. And what we've done, and we've been very successful in our district, is in writing these grants, we can show these funders, and these are private, this VCPC's private funding, it's not any state or federal dollars, it's 100% philanthropic. And we've shown them that because of that formula, and those equalized pupils are averaged over 2 years. So it takes 2 years to get those preschool kids into our cycle where the state picks it up. So by these grants, we're able to get those increased equalized pupils, bring down our cost per pupil, and at the end of the day, when this grant goes away and we have 100% of the equalized pupils in, from a tax rate standpoint, it's a net sum zero to the taxpayers, because we have more kids spreading out more cost to those kids. So it actually brings down our cost per pupil slightly, and so it's a net sum zero to us. So that's been a very beneficial grant.
I just wanted to add, Rick, this is another area that is critical for us to have a budget passed in order to support moving forward on this grant in particular, the Philanthropist's Watch, make sure that we're meeting our matching support for that grant. So this is a grant that people are watching. They're watching to see how the vote will go tomorrow. So hoping for support for that. It's an excellent program. Danielle described it. We're really targeting 4-year-olds at this point, and it's very significant. The usual grants for these are in the $30,000 range, but because of the Bennington School Board commitment, we received $135,000. So you can see it's very significant.
The last one is Education Jobs Fund. That was a tag-along to the ERA money. It was only a 1 year in FY12, and Catherine talked earlier about supplanting. That was the one grant that they actually said, yes, you can supplant. It was designed to save education jobs. And they said, okay, you can take, I think it was like $130,000 sticks in my head. I can't remember. Yeah. Maybe 160. They said, take it, if you were paying teacher A for the last 5 years, go ahead and pay her salary. Then we had to obviously bring it back in to the regular budget the following. So that was just a one-time shot. Can I answer your question?
You answered the first part. The second part I'm curious about. It's about $2.3 million in grants this fiscal year, it looks like, ballpark.
Yeah.
And then it looks like there's about a $500,000 cut in what's projected for FY14. And just would appreciate comments, what of that ballpark 500,000, what, we know that those dollars are lost, what has been rolled into, if you will, the regular budget, not the grant budget? So of those programs, recognizing that none of them looks like it's ended, except for the education jobs that you referenced. Has anything been eliminated, or what kind of decrease will the schools see, will the children see, will the community see with that loss of 500 grand in the grants?
Can the principal speak to that better? I mean, I can speak very generically.
There are title positions that we are in danger of losing. There's also the reduction in the homeschool liaisons that we would be seeing. Those are 2 items.
And that's,
And the title people provide direct service to students. The homeschool liaisons are more coordinators, facilitators, contacts, but the title people are direct service.
how many, I mean, is it positions that would be lost or cut back
Yes.
significantly? Is
Yes.
that?
Well, for title, for the title funding, we have given out 8 reduction in force notices to 8 teachers, waiting until we see if the budget passes and the allocations come in the way they are expected to be. In fact, today, there was a workshop to talk about next year's application, but we had to put teachers on notice by May 15th because their notification date of possible reduction was for that. So we had 10 full-time equivalent special ed positions given reduction in force notices for special education teachers, and 8 teachers are waiting in the title to see where those grants come in.
There's 4 real reductions, FTEs, that we're anticipating for title next year. As Jim,
Yes.
says, those are direct instruction, those are direct support to the students. There's also some contracted service money, I forget exactly the number. There's some professional development money for the tune of about $80,000. That's used to send our teachers so they can continue to be educated to highly qualified status, so that we provide the best staff we can to our students. Homeschool liaisons, as Jim talked about, as being significant cut. And a lot of other little stuff. Materials, supplies, some equipment, so.
Okay. And I have one last question, and it's the what-if question that Mr. Law referenced in his comments. So, there are 2 of them. Were the budget not to pass, then the school operates from an 87% of the current fiscal year's budget, at least going forward a period of time. What's the impact then on class size? Because that was something that you referenced, but you didn't give us a number. So what's the average today? What would the impact be if the budget were not to pass? Part A.
I can't answer that specifically, in that I have not calculated what the ratios would be, but there's been general discussion that those numbers may look like 30 students per classroom. Today, the numbers, at least at Ben L, are for the upper grades 4 and 5, they are 22, 23, 24. So we'd be looking at class sizes of 25% higher than they are now.
And is that comparable for the other 2 elementary schools? Okay.
Yes.
Also, what I would like to do is compliment the board and the administrators, because over the last 2 years, we've really reduced the number of students in our kindergarten first and some of our second grades that used to be at 25, 26, and we now are targeting 18 or 19 students. That's very, very important in the earliest grades to have that lower ratio of adult to students so that we can improve our student achievement. It's something we're all watching. We're all very serious about that, individualizing curriculum and monitoring student progress. So I compliment the board. This budget holds those lower numbers in the lower grades.
And the second part is of the what-if question that I'm very concerned about, and that is, if we're at 80, were the budget not to pass, again, I'd like to have a sense of the impact on the students who have the complex needs. What's the impact then? What happens?
Well, we are going to have to provide those services if they are designated as in need in the IEPs, the individual educational plans. So we cannot cut. We're required by federal law to provide those services, to provide that access to regular education. So it's a concern if the budget were not to pass, because we need this support for these students.
Is it possible to be any more concrete, if that's at all possible, to tell us what the impact then across, whether it's the students with complex special needs or other students in the classroom, were the budget not to pass and you have to maintain the schools at 87%? Is it more, what do you do?
Well, we're
cut
going
programs.
to cut teaching positions. The board has said they will cut into art, music, PE, and library. We will need to expend special needs support and funding. I think Rick can help us project out what that might look like, but depending on the year, you can have a very complex student move in and we have to provide the service, and this state does allow deficit spending, but as Rick explained, we try very hard not to do that because it spikes further budget after the fund balance. So I don't know if Rick wants to add to that.
I just can't.
Where I showed the graph that 80% is being spent on students, either regular or special programming. Roughly 76% of our budget salary benefits. So if we go to 87%, there's a lot of staff that's going to do it. Not all teachers. I wouldn't want to imply that it would be across the board. Everyone is going to be affected by it. I think that would generate a scenario that was brought up earlier, is because of the special needs, there's a very good chance we would likely deficit spend during that year. I mean, we would do what we had to do, we would set the budget, but it's happened in the past where we had a student with special needs that had moved in, it's been a residential placement, we never even saw the student. Moved in from somewhere, they're in a residential placement, wherever, North Carolina somewhere. They go to an IEP meeting, we get handed the bill, we write the check, and it's, 2 years later, they move out of the district. I mean, those things happen. We had a contingency, we still have a small contingency in here, but nowhere near what I think we should have in order to handle those high-need students that may move in partially here.
Okay.
If I helped you.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
I think it's also really significant for you to recognize that if the budget didn't pass and we were working on a budget of 87%, which is our current budget now, and Catherine, if you could correct me, I believe it was 8 special educators who were also provided a reduction in force letter.
Actually, it was 10.
10. So that means 10 special educators would not have their job, which would significantly increase the amount of caseload for special educators within our district. That's significant. And we have, when you asked specifically about those students with intensive needs, there's services that we must provide. We cannot change their services. But there's also a very big portion of case management that is really necessary to do as a special educator. And that's very time-consuming. If you increase their caseloads from, which may be currently, the special educator that works in my building currently has 18 to 19 children on it, it will be significantly increased. and we'll have no control over that. We still have to provide those services for those children.
And just briefly, and I will sit down, could you
And
just
we
talk
want
about what does case management mean?
Case management includes the collaboration. Special educators need to collaborate with all of the regular educators, the related service educators, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists. That takes time. So most of the time, special educators, very diligent in the jobs that they do, will spend their own time to be able to do that because they're not afforded enough time during the day with higher caseloads in order to do that. That takes a great amount of time because you have to ensure, as a special educator, that all parties that are providing the access for those children into the regular education environment know exactly what it is that they need to do for students, all students. Sorry, I assumed, made an assumption.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I know. A couple actually. Like I said before, I'm going to support the vote. I think it's going to be very detrimental if you don't get the vote. I don't know how you sit on that economic panel. I don't know why anybody from the economic panel isn't here. I don't know why the select board members aren't here about town. It's very discouraging to see you people put out here all by yourself. If we don't have a strong education system in this town, there's no way you're going to encourage businesses to come here, you're going to encourage residents to come here, and we're going to fall deeper and deeper in the abyss of what Bennington, I think, has become over the last few years. And I will hold our select board responsible for part of not growing the grand list over the last several years that would have put us in a better stead with the financial problems that you're fending off here. On a $100,000 home, it's roughly $70, you say. That's roughly about $7 a month. Your cable bill is probably going to go up more than that. Okay? So it really, we all do the talk, but nobody really does anything in this community to put up or shut up. If education is so important in this community, where are the people that are supposed to be leading us into prosperity? And they're leaving you people out here to swing in the breeze. You know, it really does tick me off. So I'm going to vote for it. I don't think every year you're going to go up 15% on your budget. This was a unique year because it's a question and all the other things that Rick has talked about. So I urge everybody, and unfortunately Cat TV isn't playing this live. That isn't helping you either. You'll play it tomorrow, and that will probably get on Cat TV after the vote. So everything you guys have said tonight is ridiculous that Cat TV does not have this on live. Charlie is on a committee that's supposed to be helping poverty. Could you please tell me, Charlie, how you're going to help the poverty in this community if we don't have a strong education system? Am I right?
I agree.
Okay. So the real facts are, we've got these people up here, and I don't know how many meetings. It's not your fault. I thank you. I congratulate you. But believe me, every time I can, if this budget doesn't go forward, I will be holding the feet of the select board to the fire. That it's their responsibility to raise the grand list and bring more revenue in our community. Not only is the kids going to suffer, but every business person in this community is going to suffer. So please, vote for it if you can see this on Cat TV in time. And if not, vote next year for it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I've got one more.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't pass. We get another go at it?
You get another chance if it doesn't pass.
Do you have time? I don't know. I'm thinking it may not pass, based on what I'm hearing.
Rick?
And if it doesn't
We have
pass,
7
I
days.
think Mike said
We
it's
can
absolutely right
put on the budget.
on the beam.
By statute, they could put another budget forward within 7 days. There's a series of steps that has to take place. It can happen as quickly as 7 days. We have to have a budget by June 30th, so we can do the math on a calculator or on a calendar somewhere, but we probably have the opportunity for 3 or 4 more shots at this thing if we don't get it, if every 7 days we do it. I don't think we want to do that. We want.
Well, I don't either.
We're looking for, positive reaction. The principals and the board worked very hard. I just crunch the numbers. They all come to me and say, do this, do that. I just crunch the numbers and produce a document. They all worked very hard to come up with a budget that, you know, they all support. I mean, I think they all support. They've acted like it and talked about it. So hopefully it's a good budget that the community can support.
Well, we're going to try to think positively about it. We really need a budget passed. We need to have assignments for students for next year and work on the transitioning for summer. So we're hoping for support. George?
Is it?
Hi there. My name's Lori Mulhern. I'm a resident of Bennington, and I wanted to come to the board. And as you know, I've been very vocal about special needs in the community, as well as in the area of education. I really feel that it is in the public's best interest and the residents of Bennington to support this budget. We have an enormous challenge here. We have students that need services. We also have regular students that need to have those special programs after school, and music and art and all of these wonderful programs for WINS, etc. I think that we keep bringing challenges forward. The only way we can solve them is to identify the challenges and figure out how to support and meet the need or fix the problem that may exist. To do this, it takes a budget. And unfortunately, it's going to be, I as a taxpayer also pay. It's going to take a little more out of my pocket. But if there's one true investment that you could make and see a return on, it's education. I don't want to try the stock market. I'd rather invest in the children of Bennington. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any board members that would like to make comments? This is the time to make them if you want to. Paul, did you want to make any comments or add or subtract anything?
I guess basically, you know, I mean, we have gone through this, we've looked at it, we've had many discussions and meetings, a lot of hard work has been put into this. We've taken feedback from the local residents in all steps of this. And, you know, I think we're putting forward a quality product that we'll be able to provide a return with. So hopefully the town of Bennington will come out and represent and pass the vote. Kelly?
Again, I reiterate with what Paul has stated, and I'll go one step further with the special education part of it. We were able to keep most of that in the budget, which obviously with some of the issues that have come down the pike, this budget does address some of those shortfalls that cause those issues. So again, your support to pass this budget in order for the everything, the arts, the special education, everything would be greatly supported.
Jackie?
I think I said it in the paper, but we've worked on this budget since late November, and Rick worked, and principals worked on it long before that. But we have been working on this budget, and we've caught, and we've caught, and we've caught, and I think we have given you the best that, you know, and still maintain what we need to educate our students. And I really believe it's all of our responsibilities to educate our students.
Claude?
Well, I'd just like to reiterate that the vote by the board was unanimous, and we're encouraging the community to support the bill, to support the budget.
I would also support all my fellow board members that we've spent many, many hours on this budget, and we have tried and given it the best we can, and we'll wait and see what the outcome is tomorrow and hope for the best, and we'll take it from there. We appreciate your coming this evening. Let's hope for a positive vote tomorrow. We'll try our best to get the vote out, and we'll have comments to make after the polls close tomorrow night. Thank you very much for coming.
So with that being said, the legal voters of Bennington School District Incorporated are hereby warned further to meet at the Bennington Firehouse, River Street, Bennington, Vermont on Tuesday, May 21st, 2013, and the polls will be open from 7 o'clock in the forenoon to 7 o'clock in the evening to transact business by Australian ballot as follows. The article, shall the voters of the Bennington School District Incorporated appropriate $12,940,745 necessary for the support of its schools for the year beginning July 1st, 2013.
All right, we should have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second? All those in favor?
All those in favor of going home?